Let's welcome to the CJU stage, Director, Influencer Partnerships, Joseph Yee.
Awesome. Hello, everybody. Hope you all had a great lunch. Let me get this going. I'm Joseph Yee. I'm the Director of Influencer Partnerships over here at CJ. A little bit of background on me before we get started. I've been working in the influencer space since 2010. So this was before Instagram, and really YouTube was the only platform for influencers. Today, we're going to be talking how to build loyalty with niche influencers. I think we hear the word niche influencers all the time. Really what I'm hoping today with our panel is to kind of introduce you to more of that concept and really as a brand, the benefits of working with them. So we have a great panel up here today. I wanted to start by introducing Amy Cedar, who is an influencer for Waylands, Casey McNulty, the Director of Influencer Partnerships over at The Points Guy, and Bankrate, which I love, I go for all my tips, and Sarah Lim from KiwiCo. Awesome. So Amy, I wanted to start with you. As an influencer, what is a niche influencer? Maybe you could share with everyone here.
These aren't scientific terms, so everyone's gonna have like a slightly different definition. But I'd say within kind of a main category of content and just existence, somebody who really focuses on a subcategory as well. So like I work in travel, and that's kind of always been my focus, but that's such a broad category. There's people that do family travel or budget travel or, hacking travel points, and that's their main focus. And for me, I focus a lot on kind of couples, adult only, luxury, like somewhat attainable luxury travel, and travel style. And those are really the things that I've always posted about and that I care about the most.
Amazing. And I know you just got back from Albania, so I appreciate you coming out to Santa Barbara. How did you actually get into it? Like, what made you choose travel?
My background's in commercial photography. That was what that's what I got my degree in. That was what I always set out to do. I kind of moved to New York with the dream of being a fashion photographer, and that was 2008. So we all know there was some interesting times there, and just the traditional print media really, really changed. And travel just started as something kind of as soon as I was like working in production, as soon as I had a little bit of disposable income, just became something that I became obsessed with. When I started dating my husband, who is my business partner, we just started traveling with every cent every day we had, and just started kind of like shooting together. I was trying to figure out what I was going to be doing, because I knew I didn't want to just stay in production forever. And that just sort of kind of happened at the time, where we just started posting what we were shooting traveling, and then kind of decided to see how long we could make that last.
That's amazing. I think the interesting thing about influencers is that, in my experience, no one goes to school thinking they're going to be an influencer when they graduate.
I'm sure people do now.
Maybe now. But I think the beauty about it is a lot of what we create is out of our own personal interests, right? It's out of our hobbies, it's about things we do. I love that you kind of transition from some of the base foundation of what you were interested in into like traveling around the world now, which I think we're all jealous of. Speaking of travel, so Casey, I know The Points Guy everyone probably knows about it, getting your tips on how to make the most out of your miles. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about loyalty, because I know that was something we talked about. With niche influencers, where does the role of loyalty kind of play into it, and kind of like your background, the strategy for TPG and Bankrate?
So my background is in more sort of traditional affiliate marketing with brands and publishers. And to that end, I can tell you how not to earn loyalty with influencers. Follow me on this one. In those more sort of traditional affiliate relationships, you jump in either on the brand or the publisher side, and you're ready to talk metrics and down funnel conversions, optimizations, audience size, all of that stuff, and that feels pretty natural. And I would say that that is the wrong approach for earning loyalty out of the gate with your influencer partners. What we found is that most of these folks they're small business owners, right? They're bootstrapped. And to your point, what they do comes out of a personal passion. This might not be their full-time job yet. They're growing an audience. This is blood, sweat, and tears. So I think when you're having these conversations with influencer partners, it's really important to get a sense of like, what's your goal here? You've got this dialed-in audience that comes to you, they trust you. What are you looking to give them at the end of the day? And really hearing them out on like, hey, what are your long-term objectives? Are you willing to monetize your content? Are you looking to work with brand partners? And to what degree do you have an appetite for that? So having those conversations out of the gate really sort of sets the foundation for like strong, good partnerships. And I think that that's the way that we, both at the Points Guy and Bankrate, have been able to sort of earn and maintain loyalty with the niche folks and the larger folks that we work with.
I know, Casey, when we talked also, when you're starting out with your brand campaigns and working with influencers, a lot of it is trying to figure out what your expectations are, right? I think when we go into working with creators, we do have goals, KPIs, and milestones, but I think part of it is also figuring out with the first few relationships, like, what should we expect, right? So I wanted to ask you, this topic's about niche influencers, but I think so often it's hard not to fall in love with 10 million followers, 15 million followers, right? Like, what are some of your experiences working with maybe creators that create more broader content versus maybe more niche, more around finance or whatever it may be?
Yeah, we have a lot of experience with that too. I think, again, what I've done wrong, I'd like to lead with that every time. You assume that like, hey, at the end of the day, it's going to take me just as much time to contract, onboard, optimize a huge influencer as it is a small one. So let me, work smarter, not harder, and capture those large influencers and call it a day. But I think that's the wrong strategy. I would say that, and that's certainly not the approach that we've been taking. I think there's really unique value in working with niche influencers and folks that, again, have that very high intent dialed in audience. They're subject matter experts. And part of any long-term influencer program needs to involve the large and the small. One of the best pieces of advice I got on this was from Brian Kelly, the Points Guy himself. And he said that, you need those whales in the space. You want some people for two reasons. Audience eyeballs, that part is true. You need to have a little bit of that. But the second part of that is that some of those eyeballs are coming from other sort of smaller content creators, folks who look at the big guys almost aspirationally, like, hey, I like their content, I would love to be like this big someday, this is where I'm going. And by doing that, you get a lot of knocks on your door from smaller folks who say, hey, I saw that you were working with XYZ, I would love to do something similar with you guys, can we chat? And at that point, you've sort of crossed the first hurdle and like, hey, that they've got brand interest. This might be a match, and it does have to work for you. But I think that working with, you can't overstate it. It's a necessary. It's a really, really important part of any full strategy. Working with niche influencers.
Amazing. Sarah, I'd love to kind of shift a little bit. I know that KiwiCo makes amazing STEM products for all ages. I wanted to ask you, what is the role of niche influencers kind of in your marketing strategy, on a day-to-day basis and a quarterly, kind of better understanding of that?
Yeah, I would say it's essentially like an always-on strategy. So that involves constantly repeat booking the successful long-term partners and also constantly retesting new partners. That could be just new partners in niches that we already know are successful. And it could also just mean testing new niches that we haven't before. So I would say it's very critical, and similar to what Casey said, a lot of it is a matter of just balancing the niche influencers with the ones that have a much larger audience. So it's just a matter of balancing both.
Got it. And then in terms of, I go back to the point of it's easy to look at a 15 million audience reach. But I think when we think about the word engagement, we think about that a little bit differently. So I guess from your perspective, how do you define engagement, and how do you, when you look at a creator, what do you evaluate to determine if they're a good fit?
As far as engagement, we do use some tools and on platforms to look at overall engagement rate. So that looks at overall any type of engagement. So that could be likes, saves, comments on all of their existing content. But that's kind of a stand-in. Being on the brand side, our North Star is always going to be ROAS, but we try to find our way there and make that more likely to meet our ROAS goals by looking at other metrics. So that includes engagement rate, but that also includes things like audience demographics. Being a kids STEM toy company, we know that if 80% of a given creator's audience is between the ages of 18 to 24, they're not likely to have kids.
Yeah.
Their audience is less likely to have kids, even if they do, and we're less likely to see success from it. So we try to look at it from all different angles to set ourselves up for success.
I think when we work with brands, a lot of the things that we hear about are like pilots, right? Pilots are really for us to get our feet wet, build a good relationship, and really understand what our expectations are going forward. So, you brought out a lot of good metrics right there. For you guys, like how long did it take to kind of understand, like, hey, here are the audiences we really need to do? Like how long was that trial and error kind of phase for you?
It's hard to define it in a specific time period because I feel like it's a constantly refined process and criteria. So even with something like looking at their audience age demographics, we'll still kind of go outside of that to test when appropriate. So for example, like on TikTok, we already know from the platform that every creator with an audience is going to have a higher 18 to 24 audience because of the nature of the platform. So we still kind of try to even bend our own guidelines a little bit when we feel like it might be worth testing.
Got it. This is a question for Casey and Sarah, both of you. When working with creators, I think that you want to always preserve authenticity. It's how they've built a really strong audience. So from a brand perspective, how do you navigate that, understanding that, as a brand, you also have your own goals and KPIs that you want to meet?
Yeah, I think you hit on the single most important part of that, right? Like they're coming to these influencers because they trust them. And that preserving that and making sure that that's a huge piece of the relationship is so important. I think that what we run into, and this is like the answer of it all, but we work with financial products, we work with banks. The biggest piece here is compliance. So making sure that at the outset we're compliant that way, that's the single most important part. It's certainly not the sexy part at all, but I think outside of that, as long as we make sure that we're hitting all of those marks, then we're really just listening to the influencers that we work with, right? We're listening to what we're taking their suggestions. We know what works with their audience. We know what they're experts on. We're really more than happy to sort of like let them lead in terms of scripting or suggestions, again, as long as it's compliant. I hope there's a bank here somewhere that's really proud of me for saying that.
Awesome. Sarah, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thankfully I don't have the same problems as Casey, but I think for our team, we struggle with kind of thinking outside of our own brand messaging and guidelines. And like there's a lot of exec eyes on our briefs sometimes, so that can be a little bit hard to balance, but we are trying to always refine our briefs and actually simplify them to give the influencer more control over how they want to talk about us. So right now, again, it's kind of a continuous process, but we try to take the brand messaging out of it. Like we don't talk in our KiwiCo voice because we have like little cute catchphrases here and there, and then you kind of make the content creator feel like they have to say those phrases and it comes off really awkward. So what we try to do is be very explicit, saying these are, even if we include certain talking points that we want to cover, we highlight, bold, everything to make clear, like these are just guidelines, but please reword them, say them in your own authentic way. Like you don't have to read it verbatim. And we're always trying to simplify kind of the must-have checklist of these are the ideas that we want to convey, and these are the absolute no-nos for how you refer to our brand. But it's a constant refining process because we'll take learnings from certain campaigns of maybe we shouldn't have put this in the brief, or maybe we should have reworded this messaging point, just to make them feel like they have more creative control so that ultimately it comes off as more authentic to their audience.
Got it, that makes sense. So you said the word balance, so I wanted to ask Amy, like how do you balance being a creator, trying to be authentic, as well as maybe the brand or the partner you're working with and kind of some other goals? Like what are some of the challenges and how do you navigate that?
I think it's, you want to be kind of honest with yourself of what brands really align, do you like and enjoy and would use on your own, and align with kind of your personal brand beliefs and your audience. And I know, like especially when you're starting out, it's really hard to say no to things. Say no to any sponsorships as you're like trying to build things up. But keeping things authentic is, everyone knows it's really important, especially in a world now where there's so many platforms and so many people doing everything on every platform. It's sort of, what do you have to say? What makes you, stand out? What's your point of view? And what's a reason for, somebody to come to you, or to, we only have, as much as we spend scrolling, you only have so many hours in the day. Like, how do you look at one person versus the 1,000 others that are similar to them?
Yeah. And Amy, I know this is something we had talked about previously, is that, in a saturated space where you see creators growing in numbers when they're doing broader content, like, has there ever been moments where you wanted to, like, hey, I don't want to be a travel, I want to do everything, I want to do gaming, I want to do cooking, like, and what made you kind of stick with travel?
I mean, it's hard because we all have multiple interests, so you want to be true to yourself and bring in, bring in little things of, it's like you're working on your house, and I just got a dog, and you want to kind of like bring in all these things that take up your time and your interests, but kind of keeping true to what you do. And I think if you kind of pursue something that you're really passionate about, then it makes it kind of easy. Like, even if we're not traveling for work, I'm always, trying to plan my next trip, trying to shoot more. Like even after I've been doing this full time since 2016, so it's been a lot of change and a lot of time, but still, like, when I'm out traveling, I just love to take photos and get home and edit photos, and that's, keeping true to your own passions.
Absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit to talk about platforms specifically. So I think when we think about working with creators, there's YouTube, there's Instagram, there's TikTok, there's Snapchat, there's so many different mediums to have these relationships. Maybe Sarah, I'll start with you. Like, when it comes to KiwiCo, like, how do you view the different platforms? And have there been specific platforms you've seen more success? And do you use other platforms for specific purposes?
I would say that we have been working with YouTube influencers for the longest, and part of that is because it's been around the longest. But another consideration is that YouTube content is just naturally more evergreen than other social platforms. So especially if the creator knows what their audience is interested in, but also knows how to appeal to the YouTube algorithm and how to pull new viewers in. We could be seeing traffic and sales from a YouTube sponsored video for like weeks, months, years after it goes live. So because we're so focused on ROAS, I would say that's kind of the core of our strategy. But we are definitely always booking on Instagram, TikTok, because some people are exclusively on other platforms. I would say our strategy changes a little bit. Lately for Instagram and TikTok specifically, especially with Instagram Reels being kind of pushed more by the app, we are utilizing short form content to not only try to drive sales, either through a link in bio or them referencing a coupon code, but also we're utilizing that content through paid social. So we will negotiate whitelisting rights, and we're not just getting engagement activity from their following and whoever the algorithm reaches on its own, but also we can kind of get more out of it by utilizing our own paid social ad dollars and kind of blasting it out to a larger audience that would be interested in the video.
Got it. Casey. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Amy, yes,
No, no.
please.
I was just saying, when you're talking about kind of evergreen platforms, I feel like one thing that gets really kind of forgotten about now, with everything being so instant, are blogs. Classic, the original kind of social media, classic blogs, I feel like have just the longest, I mean, I'm sure YouTube as well, just ROI, where, sometimes you'll post something and 5 years later, it's still at the top of Google if you're kind of doing it right and continuing, and still, having people kind of see those original partnerships, seeing, clicking on those links. And I feel like in kind of a world now where everybody wants to get all their metrics within 72 hours, and it's just like in and out, and what's the instant like ROI on this campaign, I feel like kind of, I don't get nearly as many kind of blog requests as I did in the past, and I feel like those have been a lot of my just most successful. Just as you're talking about evergreen, I feel like that's a platform that people kind of forget about a little bit.
Yeah, that's a
these
good
days.
point. Blog content has always been a big driver for us within the affiliate program because they've been around the longest. But yeah, I always tend to forget that, like you said. But we still always work with blog partners because, yeah, SEO is huge. And if they already have the rankings, we can really capitalize on that too.
Absolutely. Casey, do you have any thoughts?
I do, especially on that last point. Blogs for sure. I think one of the ways that we look at influencer platform and why it's such an important sort of growth pillar for us going forward is to get off channel, right? To get out of Google, to find new ways to acquire folks, because Google's just been tossing everybody around for the last 12 to 18 months. So yeah, absolutely love working with folks who also have websites, but we've seen a lot of good success on Instagram, and as an elder millennial, that's where I feel most comfortable. So certainly love that. But I would say that, YouTube, this is probably an obvious statement, but find a higher intent audience there, right? Somebody who's willing to watch a 5-10 minute video on something, is clearly looking for information. They're probably at a decision-making point. So YouTube is great, and that's certainly something that for a brand, like Bankrate, we're looking to get a little bit more into. And then one of the other things that you mentioned that I think is super interesting, and kind of would love to pick your brain maybe after this, because I don't think we're leveraging it enough, and it's a really important piece of growth, is social allow listing, whitelisting, whatever that is, and letting folks who you work with, influencers who you work with, really speak for your brand, as opposed to putting forward a Bankrate post or a post from the brand itself, letting the influencer message really carry the day on that. So yeah, those are some ways that we've been looking at it.
So given that there's so many different platforms, from a brand perspective, do you evaluate creators differently? Meaning, like a YouTube channel, we look at A, B, and C, versus on TikTok, we're probably looking at different elements. Because I think the difference is that while YouTube does have short form content, I mean, they made their living off of long form to start. Mm-hmm. Instagram, for the most part, is short form content, likewise with TikTok. So do you evaluate data and fan engagement in different ways based on the platform?
I think we know that the expectations are probably a little bit different. Like my baseline for the way YouTube converts is different than Instagram. But I also know that there are more people consuming punchy, quick, fast content. And we certainly see, solid ROI from both. I think the same way that you talk about folks with really large followings, mega influencers and niche influencers, you have to talk about a blend of platform as well. And a lot of why we're on Instagram in a heavier way than other platforms is just because that's where we find most of our creators that are a really good fit for the brand and message. I don't know if how you would respond to that.
Yeah, I would say different expectations was probably the primary point. Yeah, but even when evaluating, like I mentioned, like the age demographics, with TikTok being younger, we go into it with different expectations. Like Casey said, I think that YouTube, we're willing to just wait a little bit longer to see the results come in because of that longer tail. We have to expect the same from blogs too, because we don't know when that blog post will rank higher on Google, or if it would drop later if it was an existing article. So I think it's just going into it with the right expectations and knowing what you want from whatever you're booking. So obviously Instagram story has that 24-hour shelf life, unless they save it to highlights, but Instagram Reels might have more life if again, you get whitelisting rights and are able to show it to a broader audience for longer than it would have been pushed organically.
Got it. So Amy, I know you have many different platforms. Can you talk a little bit about how you utilize different platforms? And also, do you have like a specific platform that when working with brands or partners that you prefer to kind of activate upon?
I feel like some of the best partnerships can kind of be a little bit cross-platform and what's natural. I mean, again, as a older millennial, I spent a lot of time on Instagram. I mean, I love, and then now I love TikTok. I love consuming TikTok. I love sending TikToks to my friends constantly. But I feel like it's just a completely different skill set. And, it's something that if you want to stay relevant, you have to adapt and change to. I loved Instagram because the focus, for so long, kind of pre-COVID, was just beautiful imagery, and that really tailored to what I loved the most and what, I naturally wanted to share. But so kind of adjusting to the TikTokification and Reels and everything is, for some people it was really challenging. It wasn't the easiest transition for me, and just trying to find a way to post, not just chase like the trends in the algorithm and try to still stay relevant to what you want to say, but with partnerships, I think as long as I feel like aligns with the platform, because I think kind of a lot of what you post to a platform like TikTok is just going to be, in some ways you can do some of the same things, but very different than Instagram. And then, things with like a blog, it's just, that's going to be more photo focused. So it just, I think, kind of tailoring the specifics of what a campaign wants to the strengths and weaknesses of each platform.
Got it. And I think one thing I'd love to ask is for brands that are still thinking about like, how do we work with niche influencers? How do we even construct a campaign that's authentic? What's been can you talk about maybe a campaign that you loved doing and why it was so fun to do? Like, what were the elements? Was it a lot of creative control? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think one thing that you guys that was really nice to hear from you was talking about kind of not being so specific in the brief. And I think one of the challenges often with campaigns is when there is so much detail, so much in the messaging, and rounds and rounds of approvals, and ending up with too many cooks in the kitchen to where it feels really inauthentic. So I think campaigns, you kind of, I know everyone has legal teams to deal with and specific messaging, but that you can kind of give as much freedom as possible, make really successful. Like I've done a number of projects with tourism boards, which I think are some of the most fun. You travel for a while and kind of experience. And so some people will have, and it's the same with any brand, very specifics. If we want, posts of this, this, and this, and everything needs to be pre-approved, and that sort of leads you to almost want to do less when there's just so much and you're not allowed to share organically, versus tourism boards that I was thinking of years ago. Cook Islands in the South Pacific did a really great campaign back in, I think about 2018, 2019. They'd launched a direct flight to the US for the first time. We're sending a ton of US people, and just sort of, you went for a week, they gave you itinerary, and then it was just post whatever you want. Share your experience. And I think I posted about that trip for 2 years.
Wow.
Versus when, everything's really specific, and then you just sort of, you don't quite end up with the same impression with yourself, and just the same ability to just share.
That's amazing. It sounds like the right balance is really understanding what the brand wants and also what your audience is receiving.
Yeah, and I think that's, the challenge because everyone has to make a living, but in choosing the right partnerships and choosing the right brands that you feel like trust you and that you have something to say about.
Great. So I know that this space is always evolving, right? Tomorrow there may be a new platform and new algorithms and things that we can't predict. I wanted to actually ask each of you, what are you most excited for going forward? In the influencer space, platforms, kind of wanted to get your POV on that. So whichever one of you wanted to start.
I think the industry is so new. I feel like it's so hard to predict what's going to happen. I think, nobody predicted COVID, would predict how much that would change. I think how everyone consumed media and what people wanted to see. I think for mean, especially travel. You know, it was a real, and just to kind of, I feel like in Instagram in general in 2020 was like such a huge shift over to TikTok, over to a different style of content, over to less curation. So I feel like it's hard to know what's going to happen next. You know, we've only had really about a decade of influencer marketing for the most part. So it's kind of the old school. Yeah. But I don't know, I think that's what's fun and exciting and also challenging.
The unknown.
Yeah, I think it's the growth, right? The explosive growth is really exciting. You sit in all of these panels. I was just in one next door where they were talking about some staggering stat where Gen Z, like 92% of Gen Z is willing to trust influencers in a purchasing decision, especially over brands. It's just like, this is the future of what we're talking about as marketers. And we touched on Google doing what Google does. People are spending a lot of time looking for other ways to talk to their audience, to acquire new customers. And influencer marketing has been like this chirp in the background for a really long time. You know, even 2016, it's 10 years, whatever it is. It's been around for a very long time, but I think we're poised to see a ton of growth in the next like 5 to 10 years. Certainly at, you know, Red Ventures, our parent company, we're looking at this as a huge growth opportunity in the next couple of years. And I think that that's super exciting.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Casey said. Growth is definitely a big part of what I'm most excited about. But I think with that growth also, it kind of changes on the brand side how we think about marketing to the brand audiences. So what I mean by that is I think because, you know, influencer content itself is changing and authenticity has always been important, but I think that's really increased over the last few years. So even as a brand outside of our influencer channel, we are also trying to shift our brand messaging to think about like how are people naturally talking about us, and because I think because of the rise of influencer content, people are just craving more authentic content from brands too. They just expect a little bit different, more relatable. I think you see that shifts even in like brand Instagram profiles now, because people want to see kind of the less polished version. They want to be entertained and they want brands to be relatable.
Yeah.
So true. I mean, the way some brands are advertising on TikTok and just using that platform
Exactly.
is amazing and has been incredible and so fun to see. And so just some people are just completely out of pocket, but people love it. And it's like you consume it organically. Like, I don't know, everyone loved Duolingo and even the...
Absolutely. Yeah, I think yesterday in the morning keynotes, I think it was Dave Penske, I think he talks about the one-to-one relationships, right? And I think with niche influencers, that's a really powerful part, right? You've built relationships with your audiences because they feel connected, they trust you, and it's the authenticity of it all. So I wanted to allow some Q&A. We have an amazing panel here to see if anyone has any questions or travel tips they need. So just wanted to open it up for the last few minutes that we have here. So if anyone has any questions, we have people on both sides with my, yes.
Hello. Hey guys.
Hey.
I was wondering, just as a consumer, I find that I'm typically like more engaged with ads in long form content, like a long form video on YouTube, because I'm not on my phone or like a podcast. So I'll just kind of leave it playing and I won't be skipping past stuff, which is way easier to do when you're kind of scrolling through TikTok. And so I was wondering if that is a metric that you actually look at when you are working with influencers or if you're working with a brand, whether short form content actually has less engagement than long form?
I think in general, it's definitely harder to keep engagement with short form content based on what I've seen. That doesn't mean it can't perform or it can't resonate with people, but unlike with YouTube where they kind of have essentially the entirety of their video topic prior to the sponsorship call out to really capture their viewers' attention. On Instagram and TikTok, you have 2 seconds. And so when we are evaluating creators on Instagram and TikTok, especially if it's for Reels or short form video, we look at like, do they really know how to catch the viewer's attention in the first 2 seconds? Because that's incredibly important for those platforms for engagement.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's like what we were saying earlier. The answer is yes, we're looking at it, and it's just a different benchmark that you're looking at. Both of Instagram is really important, YouTube is really important, but I wouldn't expect the same performance from one that you get from the other.
Great question. Anyone else have a question? Don't be shy. All right, looks like that's it then. I wanted to thank our panelists for coming today. I really appreciate your time. If you guys have any questions for them, please feel free to reach out to them after the panel. Otherwise, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you.